I don't go to the square by myself anymore. If you want me to call my own bluff, I don't really go there at all, or anywhere else. My family seems to think my social anxiety has taken a turn for the worse, but that's not it. I just can't force myself to leave my room lately. The truth is, I met someone that I can't risk meeting again. I have a theory that fears will cease to exist after enough time has passed without being confronted by them. Well, I like to think so, but I've been jumping at shadows for months now, plagued by a reoccurring dream of the following events. My hopes are that by documenting what happened, I may be able to piece things together and make sense of them. It was a Sunday morning, and I was on my way to the square to get a bite to eat and maybe stop and take a look around the record store on the corner. After all, why not? The only two places open on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m. were Hotspot Records and the little breakfast diner next to it, where I intended to grab some French toast and an omelet. I was making my way down a narrow stretch of sidewalk on the way, along Vernon Road, when the old man caught my eye. To our right was the old Lakewood Cemetery, enclosed by a gate with an 8-foot-high barred metal fence. Making a right at the little church beyond that would put you in the square. He was standing about 30 or 40 yards ahead of me, wearing a long, moth-bitten coat that fell below his knees, and a thick blanket that may have once been white but now was a dull orange draped over his shoulders, forming a makeshift hood over his head. He grasped at the bars of the gate and peered in between them. It didn't take long for him to notice me, but after he did, he just stuck his face back between those bars and kept looking inside. When I was within earshot, he turned and called out to me, waving his hand toward himself in a gesture meant to beckon me closer. My head began to feel a little bit swimmy, as it always did when a small bout of anxiety decided to rear its ugly head within my own. I can't really describe the trepidation those with anxiety feel in scenarios like this. However, most of us would agree after the feeling has passed that we're simply spending too much time in our own heads, even if the feeling were to rush through as if by the flick of a switch. I always try to work past that feeling. I don't want it to be stronger than I am. I guess that's why I didn't turn back. I didn't answer. I approached with my head down, hoping that he would step aside and let me pass as I grew closer. The closer I got, the more my body began to feel like TV static. As I looked up from the ground to where he was standing, I noticed he wasn't planning on getting out of my way. In fact, he positioned himself to the center of the walkway. I couldn't pass on his right without squeezing between the old man and the gate like a dassy rat. Couldn't pass on the left without walking into oncoming traffic from behind. He's just an old man. Why the hell are you freaking out? He's probably just some bum hoping you've got a buck or two to spare. These pep talks never seemed to help me any, but that wasn't going to stop my inner lawyer from pleading its case. "Would you like to see my wife's garden?" the old man asked, with a smoky rasp in his voice that was somehow much more than that. It sounded unnatural, like a cheap amplifier with holes poked through the speakers to simulate an artificial distortion sound for some low-budget garage band. Artificial is definitely the word. Startled, I looked up at him. From his appearance, I surmised him to be homeless, sickly even. The way he shivered and shook under that damn dirty blanket, on a 76-degree spring morning no less, made me feel that odd combination of contempt and pity. Different, yet so similar. The skin on his neck and face were loose and saggy, silver gray hair coming out from under that makeshift hood in clumps of tangled, greasy knots. His left eye was lazy, but the right seemed to pulse forward at me. What? I managed to ask, mentally scorning myself for tripping over a 4-letter word. My wife's garden, Lenora. She works her little fingers to the bone keeping up with it. He grinned at me with what I assume were false teeth, stained brown, and wiggled his long fingers to emphasize the point. His teeth chattered as he spoke, but he sounded somehow normal now for the way that he looked. He had that soft, creaking door of a voice all feeble old men seem to have. A lady never believes compliments coming from the man who's been rolling off of her and going to sleep once or twice a month for 46 years. I wasn't able to stifle a bit of an awkward chuckle at that, as uneasy as his presence made me feel. This seemed to encourage his erratic behavior. He began to mimic the voice of, presumably, his wife, Lenora. "Aw, you're just saying that, Petey. Go on now. Go on, you old hound dog. Always crying and begging for something." He went back to his normal voice after a smoker's cough, wheezy and thick with phlegm. "She always thinks I'm trying to butter her up. She'd love a compliment from a boy like you, though. She'll be beaming all damn day." He said those words with an emphasis that disturbed me. When you get to be old like me, you start liking a little bit of attention from younger people. I'm not dead yet, right? Of course, Lenora likes it a bit more than I do. Come on, please. It really would make her day. As he said this, he pulled a leather billfold out of the inner pocket of his coat, retrieving a $10 bill and tucking it away in the pocket of my shirt, patting it afterward like you would a dog's belly after he's rolled over for you. I tried to writhe away from his touch, feeling like a cornered rat indeed. The strange thing, really, is that I wasn't. I had the entire world behind me, and if push came to shove, I doubt I'd need a bulldozer. The truth is, the second he touched me, I felt something start to give way in my head. There was a feeling like a rubber band, deep back in my brain someplace, that was being stretched further and further. With each pat from his hand, the band would be pushed just a little bit more past its point of highest tension. Until, finally, it just snapped. There was a cold thrust of pain that went down from that place in my head down to my toes, soon to be replaced by a feeling of intense warmth beaming from within me. It's just a short walk through the cemetery to the other side. I ignored the feeling of immense terror and tried to think about the few houses across the street from the opposite side of the cemetery. They were nice, upper-middle-class homes, and a few of them had beautiful gardens in their front yards that were truly immaculate. That's what I told myself to avoid dealing with the fact that I had no choice but to follow. My body seemed to be on autopilot then. I didn't feel like I was moving, didn't feel the ground beneath my feet or the slight breeze I remember enjoying before the old man came along. It was as though I was only an observer of these events, looking out of a small window in my head somewhere, forced to watch as something else navigated my body through the world around me. I followed. I was behind Petey, but my legs seemed to move in tandem with his. When his right foot would trudge forward, my own would as well. This alone may cause no alarm until you take into consideration that the old man's legs were much longer than my own. He began to increase the length of his stride, attempting to stifle a giggle with the palm of one frail hand. The muscles of my own legs stretched and ached, doing their best to keep up and somehow stretching past the distance I thought I could take in single steps. We're here. I looked up quickly, but the old man was gone. The pain in my legs was gone. Every remnant of what had just happened seemed to be gone, all but memory. I anxiously began to speed walk through the rest of the cemetery, panting and frequently checking my surroundings. I planned to pass through the gate on the other side and take a shortcut back to my house from there. I continued along the trail in this frantic state until I saw two women a ways down the path ahead of me. A short but stout elderly woman and a tall, leaner woman that appeared to be middle-aged. The elderly woman held a bouquet of exotic flowers that were a beautiful contrast to the rest of the morbid scene. She sobbed softly, looking down at the grave in front of them that appeared to be somewhat fresh. The length of the grave plot was shorter than most, and a youthful cherub figure carved from marble sat on top of a small headstone. I couldn't make out the name on the grave, or didn't bother to, but its appearance led me to believe it belonged to a child. The middle-aged woman looked off into space, with a look that on the surface could appear detached or uncaring, but was actually a dread so thick you could feel it in the air around her. To me, she looked as if she was attending her own funeral. Their grief didn't occur to me at the time in the vivid way it comes to me in my dreams. In all honesty, I was momentarily relieved to be in the comfort of others, even in passing. It made me feel safe. But as I did pass, the elderly woman spoke softly, aloud, in a voice choked, quiet, and frail by tears. I just don't understand how Peter could do this. A huge thank you to all of my poltergeists. Alex Schaefer, Bobby Tripp, Calderin, Daniel O'Connell, Erica Warren, Forever, Shadow Blackhawk, JTX31, Mark Zapan, Brian Horn, Spirit Father, Stephen Swiftbird, Twisted Skipster, Alternative Night, and Michael Folks. Your donations and continued support are so appreciated. So, as always, thank you. From the very bottom of my heart. Do you remember the mantis? You asked me once when we first met what my opinion on insects were, and I said that they were greatly misunderstood. You looked so enamored back then. You seemed to love them too. How many did we raise together? You learned so much about my favorite insect over those years, so how could you forget?